Did you know you could use Google Maps to get thousands of leads for your business? Today, I'm going to show you step by step how to build a no code system that scrapes businesses from Google Maps and gets their contact info, like emails, phone numbers, and social links, with the intention of then reaching out to them via cold email, cold call, or cold DM. Hi, my name's John, and I build no code scraping systems. And if you have any questions about scraping data or building your own systems, you can contact me at john@neuralmont.com. All right, let's get in the video and let's build a no-code Google Maps business contact scraper. So the first thing we need to do is create a new scenario inside make.com. So go into make, create a new scenario, and then give it a name. And then what we want to do first is to kind of work back from front. So we need a place to store the data after we've scraped each listing from Google Maps. And for this purposes, we're going to be using Airtable. So if you've never used Airtable, it's a lot like Google Sheets or Excel. However, it works really well with no code and automations, and it's going to work really well for this purpose. It's also free to use. So I've already created a base inside Airtable, but what you're going to want to do is create a new base, give it a name, and then we're going to only need one table for this. And what we could do is we have a few different options. When we pull the lists from Google and we scrape each domain, we could add a record for each email or each company. But because we're on the free plan, we can only do 1,000 records. So a way to get around that is instead, I'm going to have a record for each search that we make. And then I'm going to use this attachment field right here named lead list. And we're going to store a CSV file of all the data that we scrape inside here. So go ahead and copy these fields. I have the name as business search. So you can just click edit field, make sure it's single line text, then location, single line text, and then status. So this is a single dropdown, single option dropdown. And the two options are searching, complete, and the default option is searching. And then we have another single line text for submission ID. This is going to store our submission ID when we make our search. So we're going to use a form called Fillout. It's a form software, a lot like JotForm or any other form software. And when we make a search on Fillout, we need to store the submission ID of that search so that we can find that unique search in our make scenario later. And that'll make more sense as I build and show you what we're doing. And then this is really important too. We need a field called lead list, and it needs to be an attachment. We're also going to need an API key for this base. So go ahead and click on your name in the corner, the account icon, and go to Builder Hub, and then go to Personal Access Tokens. Click Create New Token, give it a name, give it a scope. So the scopes that we need are data.records read, data.records write, and then we need to give it access to the base that we just created. So go ahead and search for the base that we just created and give it access to that base. Click Create Token. Once you click Create Token, the token's going to pop up and appear right here. You're going to need to copy that and store that for later, because once you click out of it, you're not going to be able to see that token again. So make sure you copy that and put that somewhere that we can refer back to it. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set up our Google API call. So this is the API that's going to request a list of places in a particular location from Google Maps. And we're going to use Google's actual API to do this. So I'm going to start by clicking the plus icon of this new scenario, and I'm going to choose HTTP, make a request. And we need to fill out this request with the specified API URL and parameters that Google's API is going to tell us to use. And we can find that using Google's API docs. And the API we're going to be using is the Google Places API, and we're going to refer to text search new for those parameters and URL. So here's the URL that we need to copy for this API. So go ahead and copy that URL and then paste it in the URL. And we're making a post request. And then we need to copy the body and the headers down here. So here is the body. This is the text query of the search that we're making. So imagine that you're using Google Maps. You're on your computer using Google Maps. When you make a search in Google Maps and you get a list of results, that's the same thing that's happening here. So we can use any text that we want to return a list of results. So I'm going to copy everything in between the curly brackets. Back in make, we're going to choose body type raw. We're going to choose content type JSON application JSON, and we're going to paste that body right there. And make sure your parse response is yes, because if it's no, we'll return just a list of jumbled data, but parse response will allow us to read it easily and use that data in other modules. And so right now, just leave that as is. We don't need to change it. We need to add in a few headers. And so those headers are content type application JSON. However, in make, the HTTP modules in Make always send this header, so we don't actually need to send it. But we do need is the X Google API key header, so we'll add that. And then we need to get our API key. So how we do that is we need to create a developer account on Google. It's free to do, and we get 300 free credits when we create a new account. So we're going to be able to use this API for free until we run out of our credits. But that'll last you a pretty good while, those 300 credits. So you'll need to go to cloud.google.com, and we're going to click Get Started for free, and you're going to create your account. And then it's going to prompt you to create your organization. It's also going to prompt you to create a billing profile as well. You're going to need to do it to be able to use this API because Google needs to know you're not a robot. After you've created your account, you're going to see a dashboard like this, and it should have already created you a project. However, if not, you can always click this button up at the top and click New Project. And what we need to do now is we need to enable the Places API that we're using. So up in the search box, search Places API New. And if you haven't enabled it yet, it's going to say Enable right here instead of Manage. And so go ahead and click that button. Once you do that, if you don't have an API key generated yet, it's going to generate you one and it'll pop up right here. Go ahead and copy that API key because we're going to use it in our request. If you already have an API key, you can go to Navigation menu and you can go to APIs and Services and go to Credentials. And go ahead and click Create Credentials API key, and that'll create a new API key. Go ahead, copy that API key, and paste it in the value of this header right here. Then we need to add another header, which is the X Google field mask. And what these are is this tells Google what fields to return from the places that we're searching for. And we can scroll down and it'll show us what those options are. And so these are all free to use. So we can make as many searches as we want only using these field masks. However, this group costs money to use, and then this costs a little bit more. I've already compiled a list that we're going to use. So let's paste in the X Google field mask name of the header. And then I've already created the value that I want. So this is how it's formatted. It's the places dot and then the field mask that we're using. And then we use a comma to separate each one that we want to return. I also want to return next page token. So this tells Google what page we want to pull of the results. So the max number we can pull from a Google page is 20. And if there's more results after that, Google's going to give us a next page token that we can then use in our request again to get the next page. So it allows us to paginate through the results. So go ahead and click Save, and then click Save, and let's run this once to make sure it's working. All right, and if you have your API key in there and you copied everything that Google told you to, we should get back some data, and we should have gotten a status code of 200. And we have, so if we don't specify the number of places we want to return, it's going to return 20. I'm actually going to specify that right now. Page size of 5, and the reason I want to do that is because while we're testing, I only want to use small bits of data instead of using large quantities. So let's just click Save. But let's look at the data we got back. We have our next page token. So if we were to take this and we were to use this in our next request in a query string, we would get the next page of results. And so here we get the places ID, and then it gives us types. We don't really need types, but I included that in there. Then we have the formatted address, so the location of the business. Then we have the website URI, which is important because we're going to need that to scrape contact info. And then we have the display name. So this is the name of the company. All right, the next thing I want to do is we need a way to capture our search. So instead of having to go into the scenario each time and change our text query, we can use a form to capture that, and then we can input that into this module right here. So go over to fillout.com and create an account on fillout.com. It's free to use. And after you've done that, go ahead and click Make a Fillout, and I'm going to choose Connect. And so we're going to integrate this with the Airtable table that we already created, and you can choose a theme, click Next, and then it's going to ask us to integrate that with our Airtable account. So go ahead and follow the prompts to do that. You need to be signed into the same window that you're signing in to fill out with and you're integrating with, so it'll work. Once you do that, your account should pop up. Choose your account, click Next, choose the base that we created, and then the table should be table 1 unless you renamed it. Then click Create Form. And then because we've integrated with Airtable, you'll see that we have these Airtable fields here on the left-hand side, and we can find the fields that are inside our Airtable, which we have business search, location, submission ID. We're going to put business search in and location. Those are the only fields that we need to integrate. If I go to integrate, you'll see that we're integrated with Airtable. And these are the fields we're mapping to. So if I click add new, this is all of the fields we've created in Airtable, and these are their values that are going to populate when we submit this form. So when we submit this form, it's going to create a new record. And then I also want to add in the submission ID, and I'm going to choose miscellaneous submission ID. This will allow us to identify each search by that submission ID. So go ahead and click update. And then we need a way to send this data to Make. So click webhook, and we need a URL to send this data to. So let's go back into Make and click add a module. And let's drag this little clock here to this module, because this will tell Make that this is the first module in the scenario. Click webhook. So go ahead and search for webhooks. Click custom webhook. And then we need to add a webhook. So go ahead and click add. I like to name it the same thing as my scenario. Click save. And then we're going to need to copy this URL. So click copy address to clipboard, and then paste that in the webhook URL field. And then click advanced view. We need to specify what we're going to send in the body. So we need business search, and we're going to map that to business search input, then location. We're going to map that to location, and then submission ID. I'm going to map that to submission ID. Click finish setup, and then click publish. Then what we can do is click save, right click on this module, click run this module only, go back into fill out, and then let's go to share, copy the URL, open the form up, and let's make a search. I'm going to use photographer in Salt Lake City, and I'm going to click submit. And back in Make, if everything was set up correctly, this is the result we should get. So we should get our business search that we made, photographer, our location, Salt Lake City, and here's our submission ID. In the Google API module that we set up, let's change the text query to what we made in the form. So down in the text query, let's change this from spicy vegetarian food in Sydney, Australia to business search. We're going to use that dynamic data, and we're going to use business search in location. So this will read business search in Salt Lake City, and we're going to use a page size of 5. Let's click save. I'm going to rename this. Click save, and let's click run once. And let's make another search in the form. So I'm just going to do photographer in Salt Lake City again. I'm going to click submit. And back in Make, we received that data, photographer in Salt Lake City, and then we made a search to Google's API, and as you can see here in the body, it's text query, photographer in Salt Lake City, and then we should have gotten back data 5 places, all of which, here's a photographer in Salt Lake City. And all 5 of these should be photographers in Salt Lake City. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to scrape this domain to get the contact info. So what we need to do is we need to set up an iterator module first, because we need to iterate through each item in the array of places that we get back. Click save. And then we're going to set up another HTTP module, and this is going to make a request to Rapid API to scrape that domain so we can get that contact info. So let's go into Rapid API and go over how to set up this request. So we're going to be using Website Contact Crawler to actually scrape the contact info, the emails, the phone numbers from these websites. And how we set this up is we first need to create an account on Rapid API, and then we need to subscribe to this API. And so it's free to subscribe to. There's a free plan. And then when we want to scale up, we can get a paid plan. But first, you're going to need to subscribe, and then we're going to go to Scrape Website, the endpoint over here on the left-hand side. And this right here tells us what we need to send in the API request to be able to scrape that website. So we need this URL. So we're going to copy the URL. We're going to paste the URL in there. It's a post method because it tells us it's a post method. And then we need to add in these 2 headers, the xRapid API host. So click add a header, copy that value. And then we need to add in our API key from Rapid API. And we won't be able to use this until we've created an account and we've subscribed to this API. And as you can see, because I'm not signed in, it just says sign up for key. But I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go ahead and sign up, and I'm going to get my key. And then it's telling us we need to send the data like this. I'm going to paste that. And let's make it a little bit more readable. Okay. And for the domain, instead of using what they've given us or use a static result, we're going to use a dynamic result. So we're going to delete that, and we are going to input the website URI, this dynamic data point right here. And so it's going to iterate. Let me just go through it again. It's going to make the request. We're going to receive the request in the webhook. We're going to make that request to Google's API. We're going to get a list of results. We're going to iterate through each one of the results. So that allows us to break that whole list into individual results. And then we're going to make a request to scrape that domain. And let's go ahead and try this real quick just to make sure everything works. I'm actually going to run the example that they gave us. And then we get it back, and let's see, we got emails, phone numbers, then we got Instagram and Facebook. Okay, cool. I'll rename that. Click OK. I'm going to click Save. The next thing we need to do is we need to take the list of results that we get from here, and we need to store it in a CSV file. So we need to iterate through the emails that we get back first. Because what I want to do is I want to create a record for each unique email. So instead of just one record for each company, I'm going to do one record for each email. So we're going to iterate through the emails. And then something else we need to make sure to do, we need to make a filter. So this will filter out any results that don't have a website. So we need to do website URI exists. I want to name this filter. Website exists. Click Save. I'm going to click Save. Click Save anyway. And then we need to aggregate all this data. And we're going to use aggregators and iterators in Make because 1, they make it more efficient, and 2, they limit the number of operations that we're going to use in Make. And an operation you can think of as a credit in Make. It's free, but we don't want to use up our free credits. So we need to use aggregators and iterators. So I'm going to aggregate all of the results. And my source module is going to be this iterator right here. And the text is we're going to create an object for each company. And objects you can think of, actually, let's do that. Objects you can think of like groups of data, groups of related data. And so for the company name, we're going to choose the display name text, follow what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to use the get function in Make, and that's going to allow us to get the first result of the phone numbers. So the phone numbers are an array, so sometimes there's more than one phone number. We just want the first one. So I'm going to do semicolon 1. That tells Make we only want the first option from the array. Then we have email. And for this one's a little more confusing, but basically, I don't know if it's a bug or what, but in the iterator module, there should be a value here of the email that we just iterated through because we're iterating through this array of emails. So we need to write it like this, curly bracket, and then the number is 23 dot value. And so when this runs, that'll work, but for right now, it doesn't show up, and that's why it's outlined and not filled in. Then we need Facebook, and we're going to use the social links, Facebook, Instagram, and then Instagram. And then we need to show advanced settings, and we need to separate each one of these groups by a comma. I'm going to click Save. Click Save again. Then what we need to do, we need to parse this data. So let's just go ahead and run it once. I'm going to click Run Once. I'm going to make another search in my form. I'm going to do accountant Philadelphia. Click Submit. So it pulled the results, and now it's scraping each one of the pages. And now it's iterating through the emails. And so there it's complete, and it looks like everything flowed correctly. And this is the result of our texture aggregator. So you'll notice there's a bunch of bundles that we inputted, and then we get this one long output text of all the businesses that we scraped. Now we need to iterate through this text. I'm going to use a JSON parse module. And we're going to set that up. And this is following the correct JSON structure. And I'm going to create a companies array. So just copy what I'm doing here. Curly brackets, companies in quotations, and then we're going to do colon, bracket, and then in between that, we need to do the text that we get from 24. And we need to run this once because the next module that we're going to use is we need to iterate. We need to iterate on this parse JSON module. However, you'll notice that parse JSON, it's not appearing. So we need to run this once. So let's copy these results. Let's copy the text in here. And then let's run this module only. Let's delete this real quick. Let's run this module only, place it in the text box and click OK. And then we should get back 5 parsed companies with their data all looking nice and clean. And so now we can use that data and we can iterate through the companies array. Click Save. And then what we need to do is we need to turn this into a CSV file. So that's what we're doing here is we're iterating and aggregating. And so we're creating a list of data, we're iterating through it because we need to manipulate that data, then we're re-aggregating it, then we're iterating it, then we're aggregating it, and we do that on and on until we get our final product, which is going to be that CSV file. And so that's what we're going to create now. So we're going to create a CSV, so search for create CSV, and we're going to choose the source module. It's going to be that iterator. And I'm going to choose company, location, website, phone, email, Facebook, Instagram. And we can leave everything else the same. I'm going to click Save. You can click Save again. Save anyway. And the next thing we need to do is we need to upload this data to our Airtable. So let's go back into Airtable. You'll notice that each search we made created a record. However, it still says it's searching and there's no data in here. What we need to do now is use Airtable's API to, 1, upload that lead list in that CSV file and change the status to complete. So we need to create another HTTP module, and this is going to make a request to Airtable. And the first thing we need to do is we need to find the search that we made, find the record that we created. So using Airtable's API docs, which you can find by Googling Airtable API docs, we need to use the list records API. And so this is the URL we're going to use, and it's a GET request. Paste that in the URL section, and also make sure parse response is yes. And we need to add in the base ID and table ID of our table we created. And you can find that in the URL. So the app ID starts with APP, and the table ID starts with TBL. So let's copy all of that. And let's replace everything in the curly brackets with that result. And it's a GET method. Then we need to filter what we're searching for. So we need to add a query string. Airtable says to be able to filter, we can use the filter by formula. So we'll copy that. And the formula we're going to use is we're going to search for the submission ID. So we're going to do curly brackets, submission ID. And this is the name of the field that we're filtering on. So whatever you named submission ID field, that's what this value is going to be. The name is going to be. We're going to do equals submission ID. And then we also need to add in our authorization. So remember how I told you to create that API key, that API token from Airtable? We need to add in a header, an authorization header. So write authorization for the name, and then the value is going to be bearer, and then space that token that you created. So paste that in now. I'm going to paste the token in, and I'm going to click Save. And let's test this by going back into the base, and let's copy one of the submission IDs, just any one of them, doesn't matter. And let's click Run this module only, and then we'll add that into submission ID, click OK. Then if it worked, we get status code 200, and all right, cool. So we were able to find that record. So now what we need to do, we searched for that record because we needed its ID, and we get back its ID right here. And we're going to use that ID in the next API request to upload this CSV data. So back in the API reference, if we go to upload attachment, this tells us what we need to be able to upload an attachment into Airtable. So go ahead and copy that URL. Let's just clone this. And let's change the URL. So here's the app ID. We're just going to copy that. It's the base ID. Delete that. And then record ID is going to be, we need to edit everything in the curly brackets. Record ID is going to be, we should probably rename this, but it's going to be the module that we use to search for the record in Airtable, and it's going to be that ID. So delete that, add an ID. We need to add a 1 here because it returns it as an array, and so we need the first item. And then we need the attachment field name, which the name is lead list. Let's just make sure that's correct. I'm going to delete this. The name is lead list, so we need to copy that name that we wrote exactly as we wrote it. And then this is a post method, and we can get rid of this query string. We can add in a body type raw, JSON application JSON. And it's telling us that this is the data we need to send. So copy everything in between the curly brackets. Let's paste it there. Let's make it more readable. Okay, and so the content type is going to be text/CSV. And the file is going to be the text result that we get from the CSV. So we need to change it to base64. So we're going to use the base64 function built into make, and we're going to add in text in between those parentheses. And then we can give the file name a name. So I'm just going to name it export.csv. And you can name this something dynamic, like you could use the name from the business search or the location in the file name. I'm just going to use this for now. It's just going to be static. So every list that gets exported is going to be named export list.csv, but you could make that dynamic. And we want to make parse response yes. Click save. So let's rename this. Now the last API request we need to make is to update the searching status to complete. So let's just clone this. And we can do that by changing. So we'll leave the URL the same, add another slash, and then we need to add in the ID of the record we're updating and add that 1 in there as well. Change the method to patch, get rid of that query string, change the body type to raw, JSON application JSON, and then we need to change the request content to what it tells us in update record. So we're going to copy everything in between these curly brackets, and we're going to follow that format. However, we only need one field, so just follow what I'm doing. So it looks like this, fields, and then the field is going to be status. We're going to change the value to complete. And we can click save. Let's rename this. Okay, click save. I'm going to auto align. And then let's run this and make sure that everything's functioning correctly. I'm going to make another search. Click submit. And back in make, it's starting to run, starting to scrape each one of those websites. And then if everything ran correctly, we should not have gotten any errors. And if we go into Airtable, you'll see we have a new record. So this is what I searched, accountant Philadelphia. It's complete. And here's the lead list. And if we click into it, it's kind of unreadable. But if we download this and we upload it into Google Sheets or Excel, it'll become readable just like any sort of CSV sheet typically is, with the headers and then the values in the columns below. The next thing I want to do is we need to address this next page token here in Google Maps, because we're only going to be able to get back a max result of 20, but let's say we want to get back as many results as Google will return. So what we want to do is we want to start by adding a repeater module. And what this is going to do is this is going to loop as many times as we tell it. We're going to just do 1 and 3. And it's going to repeat as many times as we tell it. And we need to add in a module to save the next page token. So I'm going to add in a variable, set variable, and we're going to name it page token. And the variable value is going to be next page token. And we're going to rename this. And then what we need to do is we need to aggregate all the results that we get. So we're going to actually add an iterator. And it's going to iterate through all the places in that array that we get back from Google. And we need to aggregate all of it. And just like we did in the other one, and let's use the source module as repeater, we need to create a collection for each company. Just give it company name, and that'll be display name text, address. Address is going to be formatted address, website. Places ID, although not necessary. I'm going to include it anyway. Places ID, just use the AD. Then we need to use advanced settings, row separator, other. Let's separate each collection by a comma. Click save. And then what we need to do is we need to parse that result. But before then, we need to find a way to input the next page token into this request. So what's happening here is this section is going to repeat 3 times. And each time it makes an API call, it should use the next page token. So what we're going to use, we're going to add a module, and we're going to use get variable. And we need to name the variable that we're getting the exact same way we wrote it. So page token, copy that. we need to add a query string. The name of the query string is page token. And the value is going to be page token, the variable that we get. And so what will happen is the first time this loops through, there won't be any page token. But the second and third time it loops through, it will get the page token that we receive from Google and then make it in the next request. So let's unlink this real quick. Let's click save. Let's run this once. So I'm going to make another search. I'm going to click submit. And then, if everything went correctly, what happened is we received the data and then we passed it down the scenario and it made the request to Google. And then it set the variable of the next page token. So if we go here and we go to the get variable, the first one should be empty. So there's no token. And the second and third, it was able to retrieve the token that we got from Google's API, which was stored in here. And then we have an iterator module, so that iterates the results, and then we aggregate all the results here. So we got all the results back here. Now we need to parse this so it's easily readable and that we can use each piece of data in the rest of the module. So I'm going to add a parse JSON module, and we're going to name these companies, or let's name it Google results. And so you need to follow this format exactly. It's the curly brackets, it's the name of the array, and then inside the array is that text. And let's run this once. So let's copy the output that we got. Click run this module only, input the text, click OK, and then here's the output that we get. And the next thing we need to do is we need to replace the iterator array with, instead of using the Google API results array, we're going to use the aggregated results from the parse JSON module. Click save, click auto align, click save. And that's pretty much it. The only thing left that we can do is we could add more filters here. So let's change that to website. And we can add in additional filters. So like sometimes the company's website might be something like a link tree or a jot form. And we don't need those because why would we want to scrape those results if we're trying to get in contact with that particular company? Because we'll just get results from Linktree. And we also don't want Instagram either. So we can add in additional filters. So we could say, and website does not contain case insensitive Instagram. And we can just keep copying this. We can do website does not contain Facebook. And these are ones that I've discovered sometimes companies list as their website domain. And if they're not their website domain, they're actually just their social links. And we don't want to scrape that. And so these are the websites that I like to filter out because we don't really care to scrape these because we're not going to get back good results. And anytime you come across another website that a company lists on Google Maps that isn't something we care to scrape, you can add it into the filter. So the filter is the website does not contain, and then you can add in those characters that it shouldn't contain, and then click save. Let's save this. And then just to make sure everything's running correctly, let's run this one more time. And it looks like we got an error. And the reason for the error is we needed to change the initial result, the initial data we had in here. We need to change it to this flow control iterator website data point. Click save. And so we need to change company name to company name, location to location, address, website to website. So these are the things that we needed to change that we didn't. And then we'll click save. So just make sure that that is mapped correctly. So we're mapping it to this iterator. And so make sure that all the data pieces are there. Let's just run it again. And we got one error. And anytime you want to bypass an error, you can just right click on a module and click add error handler. And so what I did here is I added an error handler. We're using resume. So it's just we're giving the data that it outputs as status code of 400. We're filtering anything that doesn't equal to 200. So we'll click save and let's run this one more time. All right, and it looks like everything was successful. Let's go back into Airtable and see the results. And we have account in New York City. It says complete. All right, and here is all the data that we got back. Okay, looks good. All right, and let's make this a little bit more functional and a little bit more pleasant to work with. So let's create an interface inside Airtable. So go to Interfaces, click Start Building, click Build an Interface, and you can name it whatever you want. You can give it whatever icon you want. I'm just going to leave it as is. Click Next. I'm going to choose blank as my layout. So you have all these different layouts. I'm going to choose blank because we're going to need to not only add in a grid. So I'm going to add in a grid, and I'm going to make that a list actually, and we're going to make it view only. And so this will show us the searches that we made. And then we have the lead list right here that we can download. And then I want to add in a button. Let's add the button right there. We're going to make that destination the fill out URL. So let's go ahead and grab that fill out URL and paste that in there. And then we can open it up in a new tab. And then let's go to appearance, change it to charcoal. Let's change the label to make a search. And that's pretty much it. Let's preview that. And then we could make it prettier. We could add in additional elements. We could center this instead of it being all the way over there. Or we could make this longer, wide. That looks a little better. And then last, I want to show you what the actual lead list will look like when we upload it into a CSV compatible view, which I'm going to use Google Sheets. And this is what it looks like. And I only pulled a handful of leads, but we have their email, so all the individual emails. We have the company name, the phones, website, Facebook, and then their location, as well as their Instagram accounts. So this is what it'll look like. Now, we can pull a lot more leads than this, but just for testing purposes, this is what I've just limited it to. But this is what you can expect it to look like. And then you can take this and you can upload it to whatever cold outreach tool you want to use. You can cold call, you can cold email, you can go message them on Facebook, you can message them on Instagram. Looks like a lot of these actually didn't have an Instagram, but a lot of them did have a Facebook, it looks like.